Hi, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie. I'm here with Susan.
Hi there.
And it's been just a little bit since we've done a podcast.
A lot going on.
Yeah, so we're just gonna have this'll be an update cast.
Update cast.
And we'll talk about some of the things we're working on, and also some of the tips and tricks that we've learned. So where do you want to start? You want to start with online keynotes and workshops? Or you want to start with some of the things that we've been doing?
I guess let's start with some of the things we've been doing.
So, as you may or may not know, our business has 4 different parts to it. A quarter of our business is consulting, where we consult with all companies on anything, basically.
Anything we know about.
Sure. Quarter of our business is online training with some standalone courses. So at our courses.theteamw.com.
Our online video courses.
Yeah, online video courses. We have pre-recorded videos and quizzes and exercises, and you can kind of take that at your own pace. That's a quarter of our business. Quarter of our business is in-person training. So we're doing workshops at private companies, partnering with conferences, UXPA organizations. And then a quarter of our business is, everything else, which includes public speaking at conferences, selling books, doing other sort of random things. So obviously, we are going to be pretty affected by a large pandemic
that we are in currently, like everybody else. And I think probably a lot of the people listening to this episode have also been quite affected by the pandemic.
Yeah, and I mean, our lives have been uprooted in many different ways. We are sort of fortunate in that we at least have some ways to do virtual training.
Yeah, I mean, we always did a lot of virtual work, consulting and training.
I guess that's true, but especially on like the training front. We've done a bunch of research, we have all this knowledge, and we have put that into a form factor that you can take electronically already.
Yeah, we had already done that. We've been doing that for 10 years.
Yeah, so we've had so there's nothing necessarily that prevents us from doing that. I think one of the problems we've been having is that when the pandemic hit, a lot of companies really kind of tightened the ship, and it was just all essentials.
Because they thought, not just has work changed, but maybe financially we're going to be through hard times, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, yes, but also just, people were working remotely. A lot of projects that companies were working on all got put on pause.
Just a lot of disruption.
Yeah, a lot of disruption. People are out of the office. Things were not happening as fast. They were waiting on some other supplier that now is not able to get them the thing.
Yeah.
In my experience, a lot of companies just sort of did okay, let's just focus on the essential stuff, and if we have more bandwidth,
then we can think about whether we want to do some training or So things got a little quiet for a little bit. Yeah,
things got a little quiet. That's for sure. And I would say they're still pretty quiet. Now, we are recording this on October 27th, 2020.
And there's, I have snow on the ground outside.
Yeah?
Because I live in Wisconsin and it snows in October. We've already had several snowfalls.
But I think there's currently more COVID in the United States than on any other day.
Yeah.
This is the all-time high still.
Well, so far.
So, and I'm sure many of you out there have been sort of doing a similar thing. So one of the things that we've used this time to do, since things did get pretty quiet, though not entirely quiet, we have a couple.
It's busier now, but back in March, it was pretty quiet.
One of the nice things is that it takes a lot of time to put together collections of information and bundles of material. Taking knowledge and condensing it into.
You mean like in our online video courses or our talks that we give or our workshops or whatever?
It takes a really, really, really. I think people really underestimate how long it takes just to put together a 20-minute video.
We get to complain now about how
technical,
hard we work.
it takes a really, really long time just to put together a 20-minute video that is technical in some way. I mean, one of the things we like about like a Q&A session, which is the reason we do so many Q&As, is that it takes like no time to prepare.
Right. Well, it takes a lot of time to prepare, but that's what we've been doing for several years, preparing for a Q&A.
Right.
But it's not like you have to, prepare a particular presentation.
It's espouting our opinion.
We love doing Q&As. If you ever want to bring us in to do a Q&A, just do it.
Yeah.
Because we don't have to, all that stuff is in our brain. We've already worked through it all. But if you're talking about, recording an online a lesson in an online video course,
we have to have the idea, find the research, validate the research, put the research together in a way that is comprehensible to anyone who's not familiar with the academic stuff.
Then we have to fix our hair, and we have to get in front of the camera. And,
if we're recording it online, yeah.
And we have to...
Well, write a script, the script,
record,
memorize the
5
facts.
takes because we screw it up. And then we have to put in, slides and illustrations and all that stuff.
And we do all the video production ourselves.
So it takes us a while. So I think your point, Guthrie, is that if things get quiet, which they usually don't, so we're always trying to fit in doing these online video courses. But if things get quiet, then, we just go to the backlog of online video courses and we start recording, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what so we've been doing a lot of that for the last 7 months or so.
Yeah, and I mean, what a I remember we were on a plane like
that was a long
7
time
years ago.
No, not 7 years ago.
Okay, maybe it was like 4 years ago.
Okay.
And we had just finished up one of our first online bundles that we were, and that was a
curriculum of courses.
Yeah, curriculum of courses which we put together.
I think it
like
was probably the UX design.
Sure,
curriculum.
That was the first one. And so we were looking at, it's like, all right, well, what should we do next? And we just spent 20 minutes on a plane, being, oh, we should do a course about this, and we should do a course about this. And,
we had
we'll put 6 courses together into bundles.
List.
And by the time, and like after 20 minutes, we looked down and we had basically sketched out like 7 years worth of work that it was going to take to actually film all this stuff.
And it took about that. I mean, we're not done with it.
So, so just really, so having this break has really allowed us to focus in on the course, on getting through, I guess I'd call it a backlog of stuff.
Yeah.
Which we should just quickly.
We also, by the way, in addition to all the new stuff, you're going to get up a list, so go through what we've been working on.
Yeah, refresh our collection.
So, in addition to the new courses and stuff we did, we also went back and updated
a couple old ones that you didn't like.
A lot of old ones that we had done. Some of the first courses that we had done that I felt needed updating, either in terms of content and or in terms of video and audio quality, because the video cameras have improved, the audio has improved, lighting has improved in terms of what's available, and so we did a bunch of updating. Anyway, if you want to check out our online video courses, you can go to courses. You don't want me to say this. He's looking at me.
We already did this.
Frowning. Oh, okay.
Everyone who listens to this.
Everybody who listens to us knows where to go find this. That's what Guthrie thinks. Anyway, we have a UX design certificate. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just want to talk about the new stuff we did.
Go.
We did this all. Okay, right. So one of the that we had, I feel like even like you had recorded content like a year ago, and we were so busy that we didn't get around to editing and publishing it.
Right.
So we finally got around to doing that, and that was, which one was that? That was this one.
That was all of them.
It was all of them. Okay, yeah. So we put together a UX strategy certificate bundle, which had UX methods, UX infrastructure, UX principles, UX toolbox. And that one was easy for you to film because you can talk about that stuff in your sleep.
None of these are easy to film.
Yeah, it was so easy. You just blah, 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 blah. And then there was the UX Methods certificate.
Yeah.
That one you had.
That was still a little tougher.
Because so Susan, she grew up on UCD.
User-centered design.
And you become, I would say, an expert on design thinking.
User-centered design and design thinking.
But some of the other, the agile UXs, that's not, you're good at that, but you did, that's not like your first instinct, I would perhaps.
Yeah, so I had to really kind of, work on that one.
So that one was a lot of work. And then I recorded finally I recorded a course about our behavioral design process.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I did I saw this kind of pandemic happening. And so right before the pandemic really hit, I bought a bunch of stuff because I knew that it would all be out of stock.
You mean like equipment?
Equipment, yeah, for like a at-home video studio. So I think it was in maybe, I want to say February.
Yeah.
Or early March, one of the two. So Susan, at the Wisconsin office, she has in her little office studio.
I had a studio set up.
She had, studio set up. So nice. It's a nice little camera, and that has gone through a couple iterations. But have a nice Blackmagic camera, and we finally got a nice boom mic.
Yeah.
And
she's got new lighting.
She's got some LED lights that are. She used to have. In this little office, this huge
gigantic light, fluorescent lights.
Big.
2 big arrays with 9 lights, and took up so much space.
Yeah, and now
I have this one
LED.
Oh, that's still pretty big for an LED. That's 10-inch diameter, but it's really flat. Doesn't take up a lot of room.
So she had an office, and I had in the past, I had kind of done some recording up here for various things. But I really wanted to work on. If people don't know, I put together years ago. I started putting together this body of knowledge about behavioral economics, and that was such a project.
Yeah.
It took such a long time, and I turned that into a book. And finally, now the next step is to sort of turn that body of knowledge into an online course, online certificate on behavioral economics.
Yeah.
So I have finally started that process, but I didn't want to have to lug back and forth between Wisconsin and Chicago.
Because you were coming up here.
I was coming up here to do some filming, but especially with the pandemic, it was just not smart to do all that traveling. Yeah. So I got for my home office, I finally got a nice. It's the same. It's the
same
exact
equipment.
Same equipment.
Different lighting.
Different lighting.
But the same camera and the same
Blackmagic and a boom mic.
Yeah.
And so I have started filming that, and we are now in the process of editing the first
course,
which is very long. So that's great. What are the other? I feel like we did. There was one other.
Probably the.
Oh yeah, BBS for leaders.
Brain and Behavioral Science for Leaders.
Yeah, there's a couple of these that you had some.
I had started it, but I hadn't finished it.
It's like the science of productivity and habits and rewards and intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
Yeah, so we finished that. We published
that. I think in 5 years, we made 2 bundles, and then in the course of
7 months.
7 months, I think we did it
3 more. Yeah. Yeah.
So that is how productive.
I spent my pandemic time. Well, that's one thing we've been doing.
Yeah. So that's been really. I think that's been really great.
It's been good to catch up, but to have the time to do that, yeah.
And just kind of clear
clear the backlog.
Clear the backlog. Refocus on some of the stuff that's just because it's it's important in any business to look at the big picture stuff. And I think a lot of people, when you get bogged down with just the day-to-day grind,
it's not bogged down with it. I mean,
overwhelmed.
Just when you have a lot going on, you don't zoom back out and look at the big picture and where you're at. And we've been able to do that the last couple months.
I think that's definitely true.
We also, another thing we did that we've talked about on a podcast is I finished the second edition of 100 Things book I kind of was able to do that because things got quieter, right?
Yes. Though I think did that kind of happen before?
No.
I don't even remember anymore. I'm not even sure what's happening.
Yeah, I started that like in March. All right, so now let's talk about. Can we switch topics?
Yeah, sure.
Let's talk about how we've been handling virtual workshops.
So this is, way back in the day, you used to do paid webinars.
Yeah, that's or unpaid webinars.
Okay, fine. Webinars. Now, this was, what? When did you do your first webinar?
Oh, I don't. A long time. But so are you talking about virtual keynotes, or are you talking about webinars where people want to market things? What are you talking about?
Just what was life like doing a webinar, 15 years ago? 10 years ago?
I don't know that it was that different. The thing about webinars, as probably everybody kind of remembers, is...
Well, just sort of describe what your life was like back then.
In terms of webinars?
Yeah.
Well, you would want to...
I was not around for this.
You would want to promote a product or service, or you'd have a partner who wanted to promote. Because sometimes I would be asked to do webinars by, like companies that had a product or service. And so the idea is you want to attract people to your company in the hopes that they will buy a product or service you have. And so you would offer these free webinars. People would sign up, and in the web it would be like typically an hour-long presentation on a topic that your target audience might be interested in, and embedded in there would be a pitch for a product or service, and maybe a special price that the people who attended, and you'd always get their, you had to get their email for them to join in, and so now you could market to them. So the idea of a webinar was you were going to give a talk. It would be free to the participants, and then you'd pitch them on a product or service. That's what a webinar was. Still is. There's still webinars out there.
So nothing's changed.
I don't think they're as prominent as they were before, because I think people kind of got tired of, they knew it was free, but they knew that some portion of it was going to be a pitch, and they didn't want to do that. And they didn't want to be emailed all the time afterwards.
Yeah, and there's so much other content out there.
Now there's a lot of content out there. All right, but here's what I find interesting. And maybe you didn't want to jump right to this.
That's fine.
When the pandemic hit, we were scheduled for all these keynote talks and all these workshops for months to come in person. And then they all got canceled. And I thought that our keynote public speaking and our workshop business was basically going to be on hold totally until the pandemic was over. But that turned out not to be true, because everybody, of course, adjusted to going virtual. All the conferences decided to go virtual. And then, to my surprise, we actually are getting, and still getting, a lot of requests to do a full workshop virtually, which I didn't think was a good idea or even possible to do, but it has turned out to actually work quite well.
I gotta give some credit to our friends over at Smashing.
Smashing workshops, part of the Smashing organization. They were one of the...
They're the first ones. One of the early.
One of the early people to contact us, and they
have a lot of experience doing online workshops even before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because our workshops are so
interactive.
interactive and depend so much on in-person communication. We have people sit around a table and do group activities, and there's just all this stuff, this in-person stuff, and there's really two ways you can go about it. And the first way is, okay, let's change our workshop because we can't do any of the we have
normal things.
So let's come up with an online version of the workshop. That's sort of the first way that you go about it. And the second way is no. Let's try to keep our workshop exactly the same and just translate that into a digital space as best as possible. And I think when we first started, I think we both assumed, we're going to have to change everything and just try and come up with a new, different digital remote learning version.
And and I wasn't particularly excited initially at the idea of it because I'm like, we're used to doing 1 and 2 day workshops, right? 9 to 4, 9 to 5. And it's like, well, we're not going to do that online, right? And people aren't going to want to sit around for that. And then, we can't do the interactive part, and I'm not going to lecture for 8 hours.
You could.
I wasn't going to. So I figured, okay, we're just not going to do workshops. But
so Smashing was basically like, hey, let's do the workshop the way you always do the workshop, and let's try and figure out how to make it like it's an in-person workshop as much as possible.
And they'd been doing that with their workshops.
Yeah. And so it was pretty interesting to. So, for example, we used Miro boards to sort of simulate if you're being in a room. We have like little desks that people sit at.
Tables.
We can use Zoom breakout rooms to simulate working with your team, which I think that's been a really important component.
All of these have been really important components. So what we did, and again, kudos to the Smashing people because they shared with us how they'd been doing workshops. We followed their model.
Well, we tweaking it along the way.
Yeah. But we used a lot of their ideas of how to do this effectively. And I was really pleasantly surprised how well it worked. So, for instance, now we've experimented. So we've done a couple workshops that we did do in one day. We did do a 9 to 4 using some of these techniques, but doing it full day. And that worked out pretty well too. Obviously you have to change things. You need lots of breaks, and we've been able to build in interactive activities. But one of the things that Smashing people did that we've also tried is instead of doing it all in one day, it's broken up into multiple days. And you do 2.5 hours with breaks, with interactive activities, with Q&A, but 2.5 hours over several days, over the course perhaps of even 2 different weeks.
Right.
And, I thought initially, that's not going to work. People aren't going to come back.
Right.
So you do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday 1 week, and then the next week you do Monday, Tuesday. By the second week, you'll have 10 people is all you'll have. But that actually turned out not to be true.
Yeah, people seem to like it. People seem to enjoy doing,
and they were really engaged in doing all the activities. And I think we learned a lot about what kinds of activities will work in a virtual environment, how we had to modify them, how we had to modify handouts, and how you deliver those. And it was an interesting learning experience for us too. But I've been really, really pleasantly surprised at how well that's worked. And also how many people have wanted us to do that.
Well, people are...
And how many people sign up and pay money to attend.
Whether their companies are still...
Right. No, but just the fact that this is something that people have wanted to do rather than just, put the workshops on hold for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been doing those many more than I thought we would do.
Mm-hmm. Well, so yeah, that's sort of been our update. I wanted to do one.
Wait a minute. Also, I wanted to mention, as well as keynotes talks.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of
virtual keynote
talks.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do one sort of back to the podcast topic,
Yeah.
Just like a normal podcast topic here at the end.
Yeah.
So, and you don't know that I'm going to ask you this question.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
What?
Brain and behavioral science aspect.
Yeah.
When the pandemic is over,
Yeah.
should companies go back to their big offices?
I didn't know you were going to ask me this question.
No, I didn't. You didn't. Just bringing it on you.
Should they? What do you mean, should they?
Well,
How are
the
you asking this
traditional
question?
work view has been that, hey, we get all the people and they come to a building.
Yeah.
And then they do things in the building, and at the end of the day, they go home. And that's just how work is.
Yeah. For some people. Some people, there's a significant number of people.
No, for the vast majority of people.
For a lot of people, that's what they do.
Vast majority of companies, I'll say. So
yes.
If you're working by yourself, that's a little different.
Yeah, yeah. So your question is?
Well, there has been some rumblings, especially at some of the
that
larger
we're not
players.
going to, people aren't going to go back to that.
Well, if you think about it from, we'll just say, an energy efficiency point of view, it's kind of silly to have all these big corporate office buildings that are maybe inefficient and, taking up all this space and takes all this energy to heat and cool. And why do we need this when people have perfectly good homes at home? If you're the company, you're like, wait a second, you're saying we could get rid of half of our office space and just have people work from home where they kind of prefer working anyways?
Well,
And then
I don't know if people prefer working
you save
from home.
the carbon from the commutes.
Some people might like working from home, or maybe they like working from home sometimes, but there's a lot of people that do not like working from home. They don't have a good setup. And then you're going to have the whole thing with what if you live with someone.
Hold on, back up.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the pros you think after the pandemic? What's the trend in the industry going to be?
You want me to predict?
Well,
I think
using
there
brain
will
and behavioral
be.
science.
I think there will be. I don't know if this uses brain and behavioral science. I think there will be a significant number of people and companies that do not go back to the old model. But I think most companies and most people will go back to the old model. And I could be totally wrong. But I honestly think that a lot of companies do not believe that people work better at home or more efficient at home. I think they're wrong in terms of, I think a lot of companies have the mindset that if you're not in the office, then you won't work as much or as hard, or you'll be distracted by things at home, even if the children are back in school. So I think a lot of companies are just not gonna be able to make that switch from a psychological, organizational culture point of view. Some companies will. Some companies will be willing to do it for a portion of their workforce and a portion of their building space, but not all of it. Some companies might go that way in a big way, but I think a lot of companies will want to go back to the old model.
So what are some of the benefits?
Are you going to comment on this, or is this all up to me to predict?
Well, you know a lot more about this research than I do because it's all about the science of teams.
Yes.
So what are some of the pros and cons of working together versus working remotely?
Well, okay, so we know we're very social animals, and we know that we like to be with other people. And the research actually shows that the whole, what's called the social facilitation effect, which is the increase in how hard people will work and how much they enjoy the work if they believe they're part of a team, that does not require there even to really be a team. You just have to think you're part of a team. That does not require that you're in person with the team. So we know that it is true that people feel they're part of a team even if they're working remotely. And so the positive benefit of feeling that you're part of a team can continue on even when you're working remotely. But we also know that there are parts of social interaction that are different when you're not physically in person than when you are in person. And so all the kinds of in-person full body cues, body position, the difference in anything having to do with touch. I mean, even just touching someone's arm, the laughing, for instance, and the hormonal triggers of laughing when you are in the same room with someone. There are so many cues we get when we're physically present with someone else that we either can't get by working virtually, or we don't get as much by working virtually, even when we have video, that it's not the same. And so, for maximum social bonding interaction, you need to be in physical proximity. So I think that will always be a draw, and that will always be, not always, but often be a positive benefit of, the idea of going back into the office.
I wonder, I agree with everything you said. I wonder if some companies realize that they get better results with people working from home. There is an argument to be made that when people are together, especially in a corporate setting, which is can often lead to one-track mindedness. There's a lot of biases that are floating around in an organizational structure.
A
lot of groupthink, yeah. Hey, this is how we do things at this company, and we do things because...
You think that's less if you're not there in person?
I wonder if you're not all in person and everyone's sort of working remotely, and it's, maybe you're not everyone's not in the room with like the big boss who has a certain set of ideals about this is how our customers like things. And if people are working remotely and independently, I wonder if you have outcomes that are less influenced by some cognitive biases.
Possible. It's possible. Now, I do think that that working remotely, when you have to, and you're in a pandemic and you can't, it's really hard to be with people, that might be very different than working remotely when it's not a requirement, it's a choice, either by the company or by you. And there are times when you go into the office and have a meeting, or you go to, I think the other thing we have to realize is that, kind of a forced isolation is different than a sometimes isolation, a part-time isolation, isolation by choice. I think that's also very different.
I wonder too, I find the corporate world so weird. There's this idea that we do things this way because that's what you do. Because that's what I did when I was working. Because that's what, the person who was my boss when I was working, when I was young did. Because there's this how does the corporate world work? You come to work, you catch up on the stuff, you check your emails, then you have a meeting, and then you have more meetings, and there's just this pattern.
But that's the same if you're working from home than if you're in the office.
But I understand, because they're just trying to keep everything the same. But I think there might be a lot of benefits if you just totally rethink and restructure how we're going to do things. And so, for example, let's say you're on a team where you really don't need to be in person very much. A lot of the meetings that you need to be in, they're not actually meetings. They're what we would like to call presentations, where you're not actually doing anything. You're just watching someone else. You're absorbing the information that someone else is saying about whatever project they're working on. No one really needs your input, except, maybe there's 2 minutes where, okay, hey, James, what do you think about the new sales numbers? You give your little 60 seconds and, then you go back to not paying attention. And that happens in person too. So I wonder. So imagine like if you structured like the work week in a certain team where maybe like 3 days a week you work remotely, and people are doing answering emails and working on projects and doing small little stuff, and then like Fridays or one day of the week everyone comes into the office and it's like Creative Wednesday.
It's the collaborative time.
And you just spend, like, maybe you have 1 or 2 people who are checking the emails just to make sure that they're on top of stuff. But you just put pause on everything else, and that whole day, you and the team are just in brainstorming, collaborative, big picture thinking, like really, working on all the projects and getting through all the things that they need to. And the whole day is just this really fun, collaborative space.
So, the thing is that when we switched to working remotely through the pandemic, I think everyone just tried to emulate what they had been doing before.
Right.
So everybody's got, Monday through Friday, their calendars crammed now with video meetings instead of in-person meetings, and nothing's changed. So in many ways it hasn't changed, but I think what you're describing is a real change.
Well, we're starting from first principles, because usually the way it works is the collaboration sessions, the creative moments, the teamwork, it's designed to be drip, 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 drip throughout the week. So like we have a meeting, 30 minutes of it is just kind of boring, and then there's 5 minutes of really awesome discussion and collaboration, right? So it's just this drip, 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 and that's sort of how things are done. If you're starting from first principles where, hey, we can't assume that everyone's going to be in the office every single day, except maybe one day.
But
let's just set aside this time.
Your assumption also says we're going to stop the thing where we just set up virtual meetings all week long.
Maybe, yeah, for some of it.
We're gonna, because for some of these virtual meetings,
we'll focus. We'll have the meetings, but they won't be like meetings. They'll be updates. They can be smaller,
because
shorter.
We know that on Thursdays we're doing collaborative sessions.
Yeah, and everyone who needs to be involved.
Well, I like it, Guthrie, but I don't know if you're going to be able to talk people into it.
I mean, I don't think so. I am just wondering if people
and the traffic on Thursdays would be really, really bad.
It would be as bad as it normally is.
You'd have to get that. Well, maybe you could get the companies in a certain area to stagger the collaboration day, so that not everybody was driving in on a Thursday.
That's great. So it's just like, for 400 years, no one has really stopped. I mean, no, not very many companies have just stopped and be like, and actually, said, how should we work together?
Do this differently. Yeah.
And I wonder if this will be an inflection point.
I don't think it will be, but I wish it would be. But Mike, I don't know. I'm sure there are companies who are definitely thinking about this, but I don't know.
I think a lot of companies are like, actually, we're never going back to working all in person.
But that's different than let's think up a different way to do this.
You could, yeah, sure, yes, yeah.
I like the idea. Anyway, maybe we could, if there are people out there who work for these companies and they're hearing about plans, I'd love to hear from you guys about, what's happening in your organization.
Or if no one's given it any thought. And when the pandemic's over, everyone will just assume you just come back to work like it never happened.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe so. Guthrie, any other updates that you want to give people about what's going on?
No, I don't.
So, we're still here. We're still working. And we will also we have some more podcasts coming up with regular topics. We also have a couple of guests we're scheduling for the near future.
Mm-hmm.
So hope you guys will continue to listen in. And Guthrie, if people want to reach us,
you can email info@theteamw.com.
Thanks, guys. Hope everyone's staying well out there, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye, everyone.